So how do we convert this function, this form action, this client form action into a server action? Well, it's simple. Inside of this function, and that's important, it must be inside of that function, you add use server. Now you might recall the use client directive, which we had to use here and there earlier in the course to mark a component as a client-side component. So as a component that's also executing on the client, which all those other React components in a Next.js project normally don't do. Now here we see use server, and that's some code we didn't need thus far. Use server is also a directive, just like use client, which you don't need to mark components as server components, because that's the default, but which you do need to create a server action. So which we do need here in this case to tell React and Next.js that this function here, this action which we set on this form, is not a client form action, but a so-called server action. That's why use server is important here. And that's not all. If we would just add this, we would get another error. As you see if I reload, we would get the error that server actions must be async functions, because that's indeed something else you must do with that function. You must add the async keyword in front of it so that it will return a promise. And that then converts this function into a server action, which, unlike that client form action, will now only execute on the server. So this code can't execute on the client. No matter what you do, it will only execute on the server. So in the end, what Next.js will do here is it will make sure that once this form is submitted, it will behind the scenes send a request to itself, you could say, and trigger that function for you. And you don't need to send the request and attach any form data manually. Instead, Next.js will take care of that, and you can just add your logic for handling the form submission into this server action function. And in this case, I'm just extracting some data and logging it to the console. But with all that done, now, finally, if we reload, we get no more error. And we should be able to enter some data here. A delicious burger image here. Doesn't matter though, because we won't store it anywhere at this point anyways. And if I now click create post, we won't get any feedback here because we haven't added any logic at all to provide feedback. But if you go back and open that terminal where you started that development server, you should see some output here. You see 3 values here, 2 times the text test and then the file which I uploaded with the data that describes it. And these 3 pieces of data, of course, are these 3 variables which we fill with data that we extract from the form. And that therefore proves that this server action is executed, and that it is executed on the server, because any log output we see here in this terminal where we started the development server is a server-side log. And we see that extracting that form data works. And that's therefore how we can create such a server action and how we can use such a server action to handle the submission of a form and extract the data that was submitted. Well, and with that as a next step, I of course want to make sure that we actually also store that data in the database.